Alright guys, we have entered 2021 Fire Emblem Heroes, where you officially defeat your foes using an umbrella. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. We're literally winning against our foes with an umbrella. But also weapon refines. So yeah, let's do that.
Let the lesson begin.
What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is, well, weapon refines. So, what I do with these type of videos is I go through all of the characters. It's treated as a sort of unit analysis of every character, because with the weapon refine, it's kind of like the final version of that character. So it's a good way for me to provide you with information on where you can best use these characters. There's a focus on either raids or arena if I feel like the character can definitely do some solid work there. So yeah, let's jump into this whole weapon refine analysis. Honestly, this batch is somewhere middle of the road, and the next one will have CYL, so I'm sure that one will be crazy and lots to talk about. This one is just okay. Nothing crazy, nothing super disappointing, just mostly upgrades to all the units overall. There's going to be some fun stuff in here too. Tried to be a little bit more creative with everything and put in more effort for you guys. If you do enjoy the content, give it a thumbs up, helps reach and support the channel, of course. Sub if you haven't already. If you really love the content or possibly even like it a little bit, there is a Patreon link below to support the channel. I do really appreciate those of you that choose to do that. And if you want to follow my social shenanigans, I started using Instagram, which is also in the description. With that being said, let's go. So first up is Akariss. First I'm going to show you guys the stat spread, kind of give you a review of where he lies. So he always actually had a pretty decent attack stat as a demote, and I think he's fairly popular overall, like plenty of people use him. He's not bad at all, actually. His weapon refine doesn't really do too much, to be totally honest. It just kind of improves what he was already doing, which is throwing off specials all the time. So it's like a special spiral refine, and now I do even more damage. That's pretty much it. It's a lot of damage though. Like, those specials are gonna kill. They're gonna kill consistently, and that makes him a very solid unit for two different strategies that I think probably aren't much of a surprise to most people. Which is, first up, the tank strat. Now, I'm sure most of you firstly would have thought like, oh, Vantage is like the way to go, but honestly, Vantage as a strategy is not as good in Ether raids as it used to be, and therefore I would honestly just opt to use him as a tank, and that's totally fine. You're throwing off specials every hit, and because of his refine, those specials do a lot of damage. I'm sure he's basically securing all the kills, and special spiral means there's no real way for his specials to get denied. You may opt for a res IV here instead of an attack IV if he's honestly just killing everything, which honestly he probably doesn't miss. The biggest problem with Akariss, and I feel this has always been a problem with Akariss, is setting up the first special. So he has no innate like pre-charge, and that's the biggest problem with him. But there are a few characters that lend really well to that. So honestly, a great partner for him is Riffiel, which would bring his bonfire down to a 1 charge, and as soon as he gets that first combat, he'll get it rolling by himself. Another one could be Valoria as well if you want an instant charge, or you could choose to run a quick impulse seal, but I'm not a huge fan of that. Honestly. There are a couple other partners that also work, such as Lancina and I believe Hilda, the Summer Hilda. So you can definitely play around with whatever partner you do have to make it work, and those are just some ideas to get Akariss rolling, and that's essentially all you need to do. But honestly, he's pretty good at this. I do feel like this is a very solid option, and cavalry tanks aren't that common overall, so that does give you some benefit. For example, you don't have to run low attack defense here. You could run near trace and maybe do some shenanigans with that. If you can maybe hit, get in a better position, and tank the rest of the team, definitely a solid way to look at it. And that is unique to cavalry overall. I do like where they kind of went with the refine. It just made whatever he was doing better, and that's always a solid thing to consider. Now, more of the standard, I think, way most people probably initially think of using Akariss is with Vantage, but honestly, I don't think this is as good as just straight up tanking. And the reason for that is just because Vantage is not as good as it used to be as a strategy. You run into way too many bulky units, and it's like hardy bearing, magical stuff. Like it's just better to just add more bulk through the B and the seal as opposed to like trying to just vantage everything where it just gets awkward. So honestly, if you're going to use them, just go with a tank strat. Maybe pair them up with Matilda, Ward Cavalry. If you're using Freya, you could also do that as well. And those are solid partners with him to make him work. I think he's solid. There's not really too much to say about Ares here. Next up is Finn. So I don't even have a single copy of Finn. Honored them, but beyond that, this is actually also a very good refine. I don't believe we have like any dual phase lance units in the game. I could totally be wrong, but nothing comes to mind, and that kind of makes him pretty cool in that regard. And on top of that, he's kind of oriented in a way that he can quad. So he's not like restricted by his speed, like let's say Altina or something. So a dual phase Lance Brave unit is actually fairly rare, and I don't feel this role is covered by anything. It also helps that he is a Gale Force cavalry unit. So mobility is always king, and there's not that many things to impede him in getting the job done. On top of that, his refine is actually like pretty cool. It's like an Omega lull, so he gets like an attack speed and defense lull built into it with a very easy condition to meet. And I'd say the biggest weakness is honestly that his weapon reduces his bulk. That bothers me a little bit, but there are ways around it, which I will show you guys in a moment. First up is, again, a tank build. But of course, if you look at this, you're going to be like, oh my god, that res stat is abyssal. And I would totally agree with you. But a great partner for this is honestly just Flame, where you reduce a huge chunk of that damage being hit on him. And because of Mystic Boost in the B, you don't need Lull in the B slot. You should get some decent healing over multiple combats and definitely secure the kills where needed. If you're also going to stack him with a bit of Distant Guard and Res Blessings, so ideally in Light Season with like Air and Dogger, that'd be great. I wouldn't use him in Astra because you probably will just get chunked by magical damage too hard and probably don't have a Shera. But honestly, this isn't too bad either. His biggest weakness is definitely that terrible res stat at max investment, and you may even opt for res IV over an attack IV because honestly he may not be missing that many kills considering what he's doing. So this is, again, solid way to use him. Tanks, especially cavalry tanks, are not that common, and they definitely, I feel, with the like addition of near trace and safety fence, are in a better place. So this is amazing that we're getting cavalry tankish kind of refines, like you can use them as tank, so I'm glad for that. Another good way that I would actually recommend using Finn is the near trace heavy blade Gale Force build. You don't need near trace, but it's pretty good, and this is a solid way to use him because he's going to meet those heavy blade checks pretty easily. His dual phase brave, or just brave in general, is a good way to do sort of Gale Force strategies. And if you want to know why this is so important lately, then go check out yesterday's video on my safety fence analysis. But melee Gale Force is in a pretty good place right now with safety fence, and Finn is a good candidate for that. Okay, next up is Laegjarn. So Laegjarn is a 5-star exclusive and probably was foddered off by many people because of our dual flying 3, but there are also, from what I've seen, quite a few fans of Laegjarn. So a few of you probably have her merged and are using her. This is a great refine. If you've listened to my analysis on Ryoma, then you'll know that I am a huge fan of no follow-up. There's even a great added benefit here that she's a flyer, and flyers don't normally have access to no follow-up. The only way to really get that is literally like Legendary Byleth and Water Season, and that's very restrictive, and he's not a flyer, so he doesn't synergize as well. Ideal partners for Laegjarn are going to be just the flyers in general. So like Flame was actually a decent one, but also Hilda. So Hilda can provide like ward flyers or goad flyers, and with her staff can provide healing over the multiple turns, possibly isolation if you happen to kill the enemy dual hero, but most importantly, ward, goad flyer stacking. If you still use air and peony and such, Laegjarn is pretty good to use with goad and ward stacking, which is great if you're going to consider running like a Wyvern Flight Rhine build with Niu. Like this is like extremely good bulk. Her biggest weakness is the res stat, and if you're wondering why it's +3, it's because it's a 5-star exclusive, and I don't assume most people have her at +10, so I'm trying to keep it a little bit real. But her res stat is her biggest problem. Flame is a great partner. Flyers in general, stacking golds and wards, are great. Her Wyvern flight check is very easy to meet, and her base effect on Niu, which got upgraded, lends itself to just buffing her, and then she gets to get even more stats out of that. And on top of that, could potentially get even more out of the enemy's bonuses as well, up to a maximum of 10. So this is a super stacked refine. It's really good. No follow-up is great for flyers, lends itself really well to Mystic Boost, Wyvern Flight, and Go to Ward flyer stacking. Ryan in the C skill is great. So Laegjarn is a solid candidate as well. Especially in light season, where you're probably going to be running lots of flyers. You're not overlapping with like Altina in the red role, because like Altina could do a similar job to this, might even do it better in many ways. So light season is her place. She can benefit from a lot of the res buffs there. Ashera isn't as good of a partner for her. She's not a flyer. So that natural synergy is what's important here. Finally, for those of you that do have a +10 Laegjarn, she is a solid option for Arena. Not the best, but a solid option nonetheless, because no follow-up is a great thing to use. So no follow-up, guidance support, Rhine, and just amount of stats that she's going to have over the enemies is great. Therefore, if you do have her at +10, be sure to use her in Arena, because that will be a good place for her. Next up is Punishment Staff, the Umbrella. Yeah. So with the Umbrella, with Maribelle, I actually think this is the coolest refine of the batch, and I'm glad they do use a sense of creativity with this sort of thing, because I honestly thought they would just scrap the whole trilemma idea or TA aspect of this weapon and just give her something basic, but no, they actually kept it and kind of forced the aspect of it, introducing an even new field or ally buff called Cancel Affinity on your allies, and applying Triangle Adept to foes on engagement, which is that's pretty. I didn't think they would do that, but that's actually a pretty good way to do it, because you probably are buffing your allies with Cancel Affinity. So if you apply TA, then that's a win scenario in basically every case. Her stat spread is pretty good. For high attack is not bad, especially when compared to the F2P calves, where no one really reaches that attack stat. But I don't really see most people having her merged, including myself. However, I do think she has a solid place and is more unique than a couple of the other healers, which I will get to in just a moment. But this refine is good. Definitely solid. I like it quite a lot. It also plays really well into Raven Tomes, which we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, so first thing and most obvious way is use her on defense as a standard cav healer. She's not too bad. Her stat spread lends itself pretty well to this. I think Dark Season is better, so she benefits from not defense buffs, which you should be using, or possibly Hell, so to balance out her stat spread a bit better, plus getting speed from the budget like ARD Speed Res, Blade Session, and Punishment Staff is all going to lend itself pretty well. I don't think there's any really obvious way to use her weapon with Cancel Affinity and TA, but if you're just have a solid team with red, blue, green, just color coverage in general, she's going to help swing those matchups generally in your favor, because she's still applying Cancel Affinity to her allies. So I'm okay with this. I think that you could definitely use her on defense, especially if you have quite a few merges on her. The more max invested version of Maribelle does get a pretty good in terms of attack and speed. When you apply ARD attack speed 4 on recovery, blade session, punishment staff, she's gonna be hitting in the 50 speeds pretty well. And you could use her in Anima to even get her attack stat into the 60s, potentially close to 70. So she's going to really easily secure kills. Finally, the third way that is unique for her, and I didn't really expect this, is as a AR offense support. Now, the best support that she could be doing is to a colorless unit. Assuming that you run into enemy Raven Tomes. They're not that common yet, but I could definitely see enemy Raven Tomes on the enemy team being there, and therefore if you were to use Maribelle, providing Cancel Affinity to a colorless unit is great, because those Raven Tomes, let's say like an enemy Cecilia on the enemy team has TA, if you provide Cancel Affinity to Lyn here, she otherwise really would struggle against that matchup, TA Raven. But with Cancel Affinity, that becomes a favorable matchup for Lyn and therefore makes her a better tank. On top of the addition of safe defense here, I feel like Lyn pairs up fairly well with someone like Maribelle, because again, Maribelle can provide Ward Cav, Gold Cav, whatever, provide that Cancel Affinity, can use Rescue if you invest that in there. I am a fan of Lyn as a range tank, have been actually since her Refine, and I think most people would have dismissed it. Because Laegjarn is actually like dull ranged, anti-range in general, gives her 4 like all stats, which is great for a tank type of usage. Far Trace and Attack Speed Catch are also great additions for someone like her, where she can definitely do some hidden run and tanking, and combine that with someone like Maribelle's Cancel Affinity or Rescue, and you have a solid potential range tank here. Lyn could also benefit from like an armor using near save if you run into more melee matchups. So combining like Maribelle and near save armor, something like that with Lyn is a solid way to go about this. Keep in mind you don't need low on Lyn because Laegjarn basically covers that aspect through her weapon, whereas Far Trace can give you some nice mobility for making plays with which like most other tanks wouldn't be able to do. So I like that synergy, something definitely unique to Maribelle, providing that sort of option. Last up is Bridal Sanaki. So I think most people probably dismiss this Refine, but I did give it a little bit of due diligence here, and you might be surprised with what I come up with. Sanaki is, again, mostly attack and res favored, and you can really tell by the weapon that's really what they're pumping here. But the idea is that weapon does give a lot of attack. It gives 3 base attack, additional base attack, 5 attack just for being near an ally, and then up to an additional 4 on just for being near 2 allies potentially, and then even more attack based on your allies having attack or if the foe has over 50% HP. This really sets up Sanaki for having sky high attack, and I mean like in the 80s, 90s easily, and if you ever merge could even go higher than that. So as a literal nuke, she definitely does this, and that's where it's interesting to talk about, because if you're going to run her with something like a anti-range type of build where you're running Distant Defense 4, Attack Res Rhine, maybe like IL Shield and such, she's going to really one-shot most things. You might not even need Quick Repose, but the problem is the B skills on range fires kind of suck. Maybe you could use Far Trace there to get even more attack out of it. But what I really like here is the complementary partner that you can bring to her and really take away the weakness that Sanaki has. So Sanaki is a giant nuke as a range flyer. This is actually fairly unique as a role. Like that isn't really covered by too many, especially like as a green flyer. So of course you might look at this and be like, oh my god, she's frail. She's probably gonna die to basically anything that melee hits her, or possibly a bow. But the thing is, there's no red bow calves. There's red bows, but there's no red bow calves. So that is in her favor. She's going to have maybe green bows to deal with or colorless bows, or that's about it. Like there's not going to be that many red. So this ends up being pretty well for her range matchups. IL Shield, you still kind of want to use that because you will run into some range, but you probably will one-shot most things, take a bit of damage. The best partner though, and this is very immersive but also very fun, is literally just using like Zelgius or Black Knight with near save, good color complementary. He's going to take those melee matchups, no problem, and it's completely immersive. Plus, we just got a Steady Breath Seal, it's coming, and I'm going to cover that tomorrow, of course. But yeah, Zelgius, Steady Breath, and that's a pretty solid partner for Bridal Sanaki if you use her as a range tank, which you could definitely consider doing. The fact that she wants an ally near her basically says, hey, just give me Zelgius with near save near me. I'm going to get a bunch of attack, buff his attack even more, and Zelgius protects her from all her basically bad situations. This is very fun as an idea. If you happen to have Sanaki and the near save like Black Knight or Zelgius, then you could definitely pull this off. Micaiah, of course, has been talked about quite a few times as well for doing this, and of course she could do it as well, but just food for thought. So yeah, that basically covers this batch of refines. As I said in the beginning, guys, this is a more middle-of-the-road type of refines. I definitely would say the winner of this batch is Maribelle. In terms of at least design, in terms of power, it's probably Laegjarn, But that's pretty close between like Finn and Ares, honestly. And Sanaki is more of a fun idea, if nothing else, but is kind of competing with too much. So yeah, that's it, guys, from me. Thank you for watching. If you made it this far, give it a thumbs up. That helps the channel. Sub if you haven't already. Check out all the links in the description below for all the other places that I am. I'm also still testing Save Defense. You could expect that in a more updated video as well, maybe in a week or two, once I really play around with the meta and do some investments, have some more fun with that. And tomorrow's video will cover Steady Brett Seal in more detail, which is a great addition for team compositions and unit builds. Thank you guys for watching. Love you all. See you in the next one. Peace.
It's over.